Camboim is a cartographer and professor at Federal University of Paraná, chair of the ICA Commission on Open Source Geotechnologies, charter member of OSGEO, and vice chair Geo for All, Iberoamerica. She is head of the graduate program in geodetic science at UFPR and mentor of Youth Mappers chapter, Mapeadores Livres da UFPR, do capítulo do OpenStreetMap project. Her research interests are geospatial data semantics, analysis and visualization, spatial data infrastructures, collaborative mapping, user-centric geospatial solutions, open source cartography. She is passionate about the idea of cartography that's inclusive, collaborative, and for all. So thank you, Silvana, for accepting this invitation, and the time is yours.
Thank you, Luciene, for the introduction, for organizing this workshop. I think it's very interesting. I am part of many organizations and networks, and I think it's always a challenge to make these bridges. So I think this is a great opportunity to all of us to talk about how open things can maybe help to bring this kind of open cartography for everyone and have a more kind of an inclusive cartography. So I start talking about the ICA Commission on Open Source Geotechnologies. It's kind of a new commission compared with the previous ones. And the motto, it's building open source, open standards, open data research for bridging the digital divide. Our website, it's there, opensourcegeospatial.icaci.org. And I think I am involved with this commission since 2013. And I think it was initially thought about just open source software and as a kind of bridge between OSGeo and ICA, and later also with OpenStreetMap and all other open data initiatives. And one great big step, it was the Memorandum of Understanding between OSGeo and ICA that created the Geo for All network in 2011. But there are many dimensions to open, and that's the thing that I want to talk with you this morning. And one thing, first thing that you think, maybe it's open source software. OSGeo was created in 2006. And GRASS, it is the longest running open source software for Geo, went open source in 1999, although GRASS is around since the beginning of the 80s. Expanding the just not open source software, but thinking about open data, we have the SDI, the notion of spatial data infrastructures growing through the 90s. Although here in Brazil, we just have a national SDI in 2008. And we have OpenStreetMap, the biggest open geospatial data platform in the world that is around since 2004. Open standards are probably the source, the reason we can have all this open source software, and both OGC and ISO TC 2011 are from 1994. So we see that these are kind of consolidated initiatives, but sometimes this kind of crowds don't talk with each other or think differently, have even different vocabularies. And I start here to talk more about open cartography. And one thing I will talk about also is about open symbols, the way that you can not just have interoperability between the data and software, but also among the maps about the products. And SLD is around since 2007, style delay descriptor. It's associated with WMS maps. And recently, OGC is launching a broader symbol encoding initiative, and I think this is very important. And I think this kind of it's an opportunity for ICA to participate more with OGC, and then I will talk a little bit about this later. So I put some words here about cartography that are involved with the cartography as a science. And the cartography as a science, it's not ever a concept. It was graduated, carefully crafted during the last century, the 20th century. And we have consolidated cartography as a science and opposed as a craft, or just a craft. The art and technology are still around making this concept together, but the view of the science of cartography as the center of this framework. And I put some, is to have a cartography, you have things involved, not just data and technology. So it's not just about open data and open technology, because you have policies, you need inclusion, education, the local knowledge, and the culture. So my proposal here is to think as cartography as an open science. So to expand this concept, and I think this will be even a better role for this commission to not just work as a liaison for OSGeo, but as a better, a broader scope. When you talk about open science, there is a lot of principles that are important, and they are all related with our discussion in this workshop today about fairness, equity, inclusion. And so we have to follow these principles of research that's findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And I think we should more and more bring this concept to cartography. And I will talk now about each of the ideas I have, and you can discuss later, of how this can affect our work as cartographers or as researchers in cartography. Because it's just not open source code that is important, very important, and open data, but more about things like ethics and citizen sciences and reproducible research, and even open pedagogy or open educational repositories, things like that. So it's broader. We're talking about branches of cartography, as Robert Roth said before, data feminism and decolonization cartography, and all of other discussions. I think this is very interesting, and are all inside of this framework. And the thing is, cartography to whom? To go from data to knowledge, to have these broader perspectives, we require a user-centric approach, as Robert also noted, that not the average user, but all the broad spectrum of user and users' needs. And I think now I will talk about a string of things that should be more open, more reproducible, shared in another way. And it's the modeling of the geospatial solutions, things like requirements solicitations and other research. I put here the work of Professor Claudia Hobbes-Luther, Corne, and Ivana. And we are working with this a lot in our graduate program. We have a lot of studies thinking about how we can document better and share better the user's need throughout the process of modeling a solution. Other thing very important for the open science, open cartography spectrum, it's the semantics. We think about open and collaborative data models. I brought the example here from OpenStreetMap, that the data model is translated in many languages, and they use it in a wiki format to kind of standardize the way the tags and the classifications are used. I think this is a huge project, a global data model, and doing it in a collaborative way, it's the best way to do it. It's not perfect, there's still a lot of implications on that. And I think things about linked data, and now we have the ICA Commission on Geospatial Semantics, I think since Tokyo, and I think it's a very important commission to have. I brought one example here, but we are working with semantics. I brought here the thesis from Adriana that work with the connections between data models. I think to open this kind of connections in form of ontologies, sharing these ontologies is a very important way to share knowledge about geospatial. In terms of open data, we are still working with SDIs and thinking about the evolution of SDIs from the approach of a more data-centric approach to a user-centric SDI. This is still very challenging. I think it's a challenge for all national SDIs initiative to become even more important. We had last month Brazilian symposium on SDI, and a lot of works there were talking about really how to insert the user in this more traditional SDI concept. And we have all this collaborative mapping and OpenStreetMap, and we are researching about data quality and integration of OpenStreetMap with authoritative mapping. And working some user context, we are researching here also contexts like favelas, for example. That's the research of Everton Bortolini, and this is important to, if you want to finish the digital divide, we need to bring to the map people that are invisible, but this is not an easy task. There is a lot of ethical questions to be answered here, and I think this is a huge field of research. And even going through things like big data and NoSQL and other thinkings of I put here the research agenda of the geospatial big data and cartography. So I think for this, from this, even artificial intelligence brought to cartography are all technological perspectives that are important. We're thinking also about open communities. Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team that is very important in a lot of disasters, and now during COVID responses, and it's a great team to work with, and youth mappers. We have tomorrow the first meeting of the Youth Mappers Brazil. We have now 2 chapters, one here in Federal University of Paraná, the other one in Federal University of Bahia, and we will chat tomorrow night about about youth mappers. I like their motto is we don't build maps, we build mappers, and I think this is very interesting. So we can't do anything that is open without a community that is open. So I think blogs, podcasts, telegrams, YouTube channels, these kind of things should give voice for the people that are mapping and to them to talk to each other. I think it's great. We have now more than 200 Youth Mappers chapters around the world. And our chapter here it's very linked with our theme this day of the workshop, because we elected our main task for our chapter is to mapping urban accessibility. So we have already a YouTube channel that has a lot of talks with people from urban planning to talk about accessibility for disabled, blind people with using wheelchairs, etc. And the lack of data about this in Brazil. So we have a presentation tomorrow and a mapathon on Thursday. And I think this is a great way to bring accessibility also into our maps. Talking briefly about another dimension of open, that if it's open science, it should have their data open. So we are some years now working with academic SDI, because university not just teaches, but produce a lot of data and and this data should be available. We have our portal, our GeoNode portal, and I think this is one main thing to make cartography more accessible. It's to put the data made within academic field more available for everyone, not just papers and text, but also data, and also I changed the order here, no. And also software. I will talk about the software later. I put some papers here about our academic SDI and a network of academic SDIs that was built here in Brazil. We need also to have open data policies. We had in Brazil our Brazilian SDI in 2008, open data legislation since 2011, but we are facing a lot of challenges. Since last year, we had problems with our data, for example, from INPE, that is the research institute that published data from Amazon. So it was threatened in a lot of ways. Even our IBGE, that is our National Geographic and Statistic Institute, is facing a lot of problems to make our census that was postponed to next year due to the pandemic, but it has a lot of funding problems. Also, and the National Commission of Cartography that was extinguished in 2019. So now we don't have anyone in the federal government that is actually able to provide, for example, new standards for our Brazilian NSDI. So it's very troubling. So it's one thing that we took it for granted. Once we had this legislation, we had in 2018 a celebration of 10 years of our NSDI. And by then, I didn't imagine that like 2 years later, we had this kind of problems that we had now. Even problem with transparency of data from COVID-19. Cases and all of that. We had problems this month about that, so it's very worrying. Talking about the open source software, I think OSGeo is doing a great job. OSGeo Live, it's a great platform. You can have an Ubuntu Linux distribution with all geospatial software you can imagine. And one change I can see now is crowdfunding. I think it's very interesting to see now people uniting to collaborative fund new functions, for example, to QGIS. Now we have the most recent, it's LiDAR capability to have cloud data in QGIS. So I think this is a very exciting way to think about open source software nowadays. But bringing again to the open source software in academic perspective, we did this study with a student that's now a PhD student, Eduardo, and we saw, we interviewed a lot of people from academic and professional backgrounds, and you see that in academic software is much more rare to share their code. So I think it's, again, a way to think the academia as a more open environment. Other thing is the educational resources. If you have a lot of things about QGIS or any open source software, but you don't have education materials, it's not inclusive. And if it is all in English, it's not inclusive as well. So we are working with Geo4All Iberoamérica, thinking about translating more things into English, to Spanish. I talked already with Meno Crack about translating the book, the SDG book, to Portuguese or to Spanish. I think this kind of the language barrier must be finished as well. We have materials in UN OpenGIS initiative. Now, this year, we have more than ever online events and remote teaching. So we were forced to go online. So I have now a lot of online courses that can be shared, and I think this is the same for a lot of people around the world. And one thing about education, and this is a link with the Commission on Children as well, is the Olimpíada Brasileira de Cartografia. It's our cartographic Olympic Games for school or high schools. It is going for the 4th edition in 2021. The good news, we got some funding for the next edition, and it's a thrill to work with them. It's schools from all over the country doing maps, and we have a lot of resources teaching how to do these maps that are available as well. And this afternoon, one of my students will analyze, will share with you some results we had, because last 2019 edition, one of the tasks was to do tactile mapping, and the results were amazing. So stay tuned for to this afternoon. And just to approaching the end, I'm very concerned about some aspects of open cartography. One is a part of the symbols. We did a GitHub repository called Open Cartographic Styles, and now we have a style hub of QGIS. It's very interesting. So we can share not just the data, not just the software, but the symbols are open source. And the other thing, we work a lot of user tests. We have some colleagues here, Luciene, Márcio, André, that we are all in the same Cartografia and SIG research group, and we do a lot of tests. But I think today is still lack of reproducible tests and frameworks to better document and exchange protocols and results of testing. Open standards are still an issue. We have OGC and ISO TC 2011. They are always evolving. And now we're starting an ICA OGC initiative with the Commission on SDI Standards, Commission on Open Source Geospatial Technologies, and Commission on Cognitive Issues. So this is an invitation. Join us. if you want to be part of these talks. Most of these, it's about standards for cartography, for user tests and symbols. So we have a lot of challenges just to finish. There's a lot of things that are cross-cultural, inequalities. We have challenges about ethics, taking things for granted, and to see cartography as all science, technology, and art. So we have some activities, maybe a new research agenda on open cartography science, and maybe translate collaboratively this ICA SDJ book. And that's it. Thank you a lot. Just a last announce. We have our process to master's and PhD open until the end of this week. So if you want to apply to make a master's or PhD with our group, feel free. And for now, that's it. Thank you a lot for your attention.